Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm originally from Scotland, but I now own a fabric shop in Birmingham, and for my creative tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this really gorgeous memory quilt, and I'm going to be using old babygrows to do that. So if you've got kids at home, and as you'll know, babies grow out of babygrows very quickly and it seems a shame to get rid of them. So I'm going to show you how to cut them up and put them all back together again to make a really beautiful quilt. So I've got one ready made here. So as you can see, it's nice and colourful. I'm going to talk you through the steps to make your own. So first of all, I've got my little baby quilt here, which is no longer needed, but we're going to cut it up to make up the squares. So what you want to do first of all is just cut up down the side. So along that side seam of the baby grow, you're just going to start cutting it right open like that, up to the shoulder and then into the neck, and this will mean that it can open out into a much flatter piece of fabric. So because baby grows are made out of stretchy fabric, before you actually cut your squares out, it's important to stabilise the fabric and make it a little bit firmer. And to do that, I'm going to use this special stuff here. So it is called fusible interfacing or iron-on interfacing, and it's got a special glue on the back. Once you iron it onto your baby grow, it's going to stabilise the fabric and stop it from stretching. The squares that I cut out are going to be 5.5 inches big, but I've cut out my interfacing a little bit bigger than that. It's just so that once you've fixed the fabric in place, it's much more accurate to cut it down. So you want to just try and squeeze on as many squares as you can. Normally you can get at least one out the front, a couple out the back, and then one in the middle as well. Okay, so we've got them all ironed on, and then you're ready to cut out your squares. What to do is just get a template just out of paper, or I've got a bit of newspaper here. Just put that onto your square. So make sure you've got a little bit of that interfacing all the way around. Pin it onto the fabric. So to make a quilt that is 90 centimetres by a metre, you're going to need 56 squares, which for me worked out to be roughly about 11 or 12 baby grows, but it will just depend on what size they are. Also just depends on how many different designs you want in it as well. Okay, so then I've got my square, and as you'll see, it makes the fabric much more stable. It means that it can't stretch anymore, so it's much easier to then sew it together. So once you've got all your squares, then you have to lay them all out in a grid. It's going to be a 7 by 8 square grid that you're going to lay out, and you can sort of mix all the patterns up until you get all sort of design and colours that you're happy with. Squeeze that one on at the end, and then so once you've got your grid, you then want to join them up into rows. So that's what I've done with this one already. I've sewn it so that it's like a row of squares, so that's what I have to do with this one now. On my sewing machine, I'm going to use a special foot that is called a 1/4 inch foot, and this is specific for quilting, and allows you to use a really narrow seam allowance. If you don't have a foot like this for your machine, don't worry, you'll still be able to do it with a regular foot as well. This just makes it a little bit easier. And then I'm going to take my stack of squares and start putting them together. So you take the first two like that, and you're going to put them facing each other, so you're hiding the pattern on the inside, and we're just going to sew straight down that one side. So once you have all your squares sewn together, then you're ready to into the row. Then you're ready to start sewing the rows together. Put your two bits together, again right sides facing, so you're putting the pattern side of the fabric together, and then just make sure that your seam allowances just match up there, and you can pop a little pin in it as well just to make sure that they stay lined up. And then you're just going to be sewing all the way straight along here. All right, so same seam allowance again, you're going to be using 1/4 inch. So once you get to the end of sewing that row on, then you're just ready to line your next one up. So you can see, just take these pins out, you can see that the final size of the quilt is starting to come together nicely. So we've got this one last row to put on. So again, in the same way, just put your fabric right sides facing, match it up at the seam line there, pin it, and then sew all the way across. Okay, so once you've finished sewing all of your rows together, you're then going to have your finished quilt front, and then it's time to turn it into an actual quilt. Now, just to make it sit a little bit flatter on all of the seams that you've sewn, it's a good idea just to give it a little bit of an iron again, just to make the seams sit flat. Don't worry too much about getting it accurate, it's just as long as it's a little bit flatter than it was before. Now that my quilt front is all nice and flat and pressed, then it's time to layer it up. So you're going to need a piece of backing fabric here, and the backing fabric needs to be a bit bigger than your main front quilt, because what we're going to do is bring some of that backing fabric up and round the sides to create an edging all the way round. You need your backing fabric, and then you also need some wadding as well. So this is just regular wadding fabric, it's polyester, you can get cotton ones as well. And it's important, so that you've not got any creases in your backing fabric, just give it a quick iron before you lay it out. Okay, so that backing fabric is going to get laid out onto the table with the wrong side of the fabric facing up. So you've got the pattern side facing down. Then on top of that, you're going to put your piece of wadding, then put your wadding on top, like that, and then your quilt top is going to go on both of those layers so that the wadding is in between. And what you have to do now is attach all of these layers together. So you can do that with either just pins, or you can use safety pins as well. The other thing that you can use, some spray adhesive, which is suitable for working with fabrics. So it's not just like a spray mount, it's a special one for fabric. Just spray that lightly, like so, and then just smooth your wadding on top and make sure it's nice and flat. So we're just going to spray again, a little bit like that, and then we put our quilt top on top of it as well. And we want to make sure that we've got a bit of extra fabric and a bit of extra wadding all the way around. Now, you don't need to worry about being too precise at the moment. If you make sure the wadding is roughly about 5 centimetres bigger and the fabric is roughly about 10 centimetres bigger, but again, don't worry about being too precise, we're going to cut that down later anyway. What tends to happen is once you start sewing all of these together, things can move. So it's a good idea just to have more than what you need. So once you've got it all smoothed out and all of the layers are together, either with the spray adhesive or with pins or safety pins, then it's time to sew them together. So I'm going to put a special foot on my machine again. It's called a walking foot. And what this does is it just helps to grip the fabric to feed it through the machine. So it's useful when you've got a lot of layers to sew through, like in this quilt. If you don't have one of these, you'll probably still be able to manage it, but you maybe have to sort of push all the layers through the machine a little bit more. What I'm going to do is start sewing, but I'm going to sew directly on top of the seam line. So I'm going to sew in between all of these squares. It's good to start in the middle and then work your way out, just so that any fabric slipping around can sort of be pushed to the edges. Okay, so to fit it underneath the sewing machine, what you can do is just sort of roll it up a little bit like this so that you can feed it through, okay? So as you can see with the walking foot, the machine's just able to grip onto all the layers of fabric a lot easier. Okay, so from the front of the quilt, you're not really going to see your line of stitching at all. It will just sort of blend into the fabric. So once you've repeated that on all of the seams, on the whole grid of the front of the quilt, then you're left with this sort of crisscross grid effect on the back of the fabric. And what I did just to finish it off was then go around the whole outside edge of the quilt, just so that it completed my squares at the edge as well. So once you've got the layers all sewn together, it's time to trim the wadding and the backing fabric down. What we're going to do is mark it so that the wadding is going to be 3 centimetres bigger than our finished, than our quilt front. So you just want to mark that. You're going to do that all the way around and then trim it to size. So if I just do this little section just now to show you. So this is why it's always good to have more than what you need. So once that's cut to 3 centimetres, we want the backing fabric to then be 7.5 centimetres. Okay, so that gets trimmed down. You'd repeat the same on this side as well, and then you're ready to fold it over and over again, and then we're just going to be hand sewing it around the edge. So if I show you on the edge of my one that I've got here, and what I've done is at the corner, I've taken it back a little bit just so that you can see how it all sort of comes together. So I've pressed this edge here, so I've turned it under because you don't want a raw edge at the side of your quilt. You turn that under, fold it over your wadding, and then at the corner, you can just tuck it all in like so, so that you get a nice little sort of triangle pointy bit at the corner, and then you're just going to be hand sewing that closed. So you just need regular needle and a thread, and you're going to be using a ladder stitch to sew it together so that you don't end up seeing it. And then that is you just finishing off your quilt. As you can see in the one I've made here, it's a really nice way to make use of little features that you might get in some of the baby clothes that you're using as well. So it might be a little pocket like this one here, you can incorporate that in as well, or it might be like a little mouse like I've got on this one here. You saw in the boys version I've got a little car, and they were just all part of the clothes already, so it's a really nice way just to make use of those features. So it might be like a special baby grow that was given as a gift, and then it just gives you a chance to use it. We're then just working between the fold that you've pressed in the backing fabric, taking a little stitch, and then same again in the quilt front, so that all of our raw edges are hidden to the inside. Okay, so you're taking a stitch in the quilt front there, just a little bit in from the edge of the fabric, then a bit of a stitch in the fold. So you just repeat that all the way around the edge of the quilt, just to finish it off, and then once you're done, that is you finished your beautiful baby quilt full of memories of all your little boy or girl's clothes. So thanks for watching, and I hope it's inspired you to give it a go.